Good morning. Good morning. I would like to welcome you to the meeting of the Montgomery County Housing Opportunities Commission. I must say that in my term on serving on HOC's commission, it's the earliest meeting that I can remember holding at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I want to welcome our commissioners and those of you who may be on the viewing public. Let me introduce other members. I'm Roy Priest, chair of the commission. Also present is our Vice Chair, Frank Kelleher, Chair Pro Tem, Jeffrey Merkowitz. Also to his right is Commissioner Robin Solomon. And also online is Commissioner Rick Nelson. And we have a quorum present, and so we'll proceed with the meeting. I want to thank all of you all, especially the commissioners, for coming out so early this morning. When we originally scheduled our November the 1st meeting, we were going to use it as a follow-up to the discussion we had on October the 26th, which was also an open meeting to talk about our strategic plan. We went through the process of reviewing the outline that was presented to us at that time, and now our consultant Public Works is working to put together a first draft of the strategic plan. They'll provide for a continuing set of conversations and discussions that we'll have among ourselves as we review that document. And all perspectives, whether or not they're majority, minority, or any other standing on a part of commissioners, will be aired, talked about, and discussed, and final decisions were made before we adopt through resolution a strategic plan. So in fact, this is just another iteration of our ability to be able to move forward and have conversation. So I look forward to getting that product, and we can get into it and finally hopefully lead to us adopting a strategic plan in the very near term. But I want to thank the members of the public who have participated in this discussion. Thank the staff and the work they've done working with Public Works to get us to a point where hopefully we can be able to move forward in the very near term. So thank all you all for that. Today, we're going to focus on our proposed legislative priorities for 2024. It is also, in a way, a first for us because we are, in fact, getting ahead of the normal hectic legislative process that occurs at both our county level and state level. And so we want to set forth our statement of what we think are some of the priorities we want to look for in legislation that may go forward, and just conversations that may go forward talking about how we would like to position our agency. And hopefully many of these things will be also consistent with what we will have included in our strategic plan. So the two things dovetail together and in fact speak to the same issues about who we are, what we are looking to do, and how we can strengthen our roles and responsibilities as commissioners here at HOC, and working with the public and working with our residents, with other stakeholders, and other people who are invested in seeing that affordable housing is in fact provided for in the county for all residents who are eligible and those who are in need. So thank you all very much. So I'm going to turn to our president, executive director, Chelsea Andrews, for lead on to this discussion about our proposed legislative priorities for 2024. And before I turn to you, is there any other member of the commission who has anything they want to say prior to having this conversation? If not, good morning, welcome, and I'll turn to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, the public, and the HOC team. We really are excited to present to the board an opportunity to discuss potential legislative priorities for our agency this year. This is the first time we've had an opportunity to engage in this way. And as the board is aware, we've stood up a new division, our Department of Government Affairs division, which is led by Ken Silverman. And with the work of his mighty team, we've been able to develop some priorities that we can advocate for and or lean on our supporters for support in as it pertains to local, state, and federal legislative priorities. And so as we walk through these priorities, we of course would love to have an engaging discussion with the board, make sure we're in alignment in regards to where HOC should be focusing its energy and its priorities. As we know, within this last year, the council expanded, There's new delegates, there's a new governor. It's a fresh new season, and definitely there's a lot of interest in affordable housing. And quite frankly, we often are asked what someone, a legislator or others, can do to support our mission and our goals. And so this is one of the many tools in our toolbox in terms of getting the support we need, both on a policy level as well as potential resource level from our different government stakeholders and partners. And so I'd like to turn it over to Ken Silverman to walk us through today's presentation and welcome feedback along the way. And thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you, President Andrews, for those comments. We are very excited to be here this morning with you. We're pleased to have had the opportunity to present these proposed priorities to the Administrative and Regulatory Committee on October 23rd. And we're pleased that they voted to support the priorities and bring them before the full commission. Looking forward to presenting them here before you today. Next slide, please.
Could I just correct that the committee sent it forward to the full commission without recommendation either way? Just for the record.
Okay.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I stand corrected. That was for the other item on the agenda that day. Thank you. We did support these. Apologies for interrupting.
Oh, by all means. So because this is the first time that HOC has adopted legislative priorities in this particular format, I just wanted to share some reasons why staff believes this is an important exercise for the commission to undertake. And basically two main reasons. One is guidance to staff about what the commission wants us to focus our time and efforts on. And then the other is an opportunity for messaging to all of our stakeholders, elected officials first and foremost, but of course, the public and customers, applicants, anybody who's interested in what HOC does. And it also helps us communicate some of the limits and some of the things that we don't control and guide folks who may want to join in our advocacy. And I'll give, next slide, please. So this is just an overview of how staff came up with this particular list that we're going to present to you this morning. We, of course, started with the positions that the commission has taken in the past. We reviewed the published priorities of a very, I think, large number of key partners and advocacy groups that are aligned. One newer example, the Maryland Association of Counties announced last week that they were going to make housing and affordable housing one of their four, top priorities for this legislative session in the state legislature. It will be very helpful to us to have a published list of priorities that the commission has supported that we can, share with them and say, well, here, please consider these items as you develop that agenda. And then we, of course, drew very heavily from the strategic planning process that we've been engaged in so far. So taking feedback from all of the discussions that commissioners have had, from the research that Public Works has done, and from all of the stakeholder feedback. And then we did reach out to each division and engage with them to hear what issues they might encounter, what kind of legislative relief might be helpful for them. And then also to, verify everything that's on the list and make sure it's accurate and does what we hope that it will do. Next slide, please. So we've grouped our proposed priorities into four categories: more affordable homes, more rental assistance, more supportive services, and regulatory flexibility. Next slide, please. And here you can see we have 34 separate items, and we've put them on a grid here. I think it is important to be able to see them all together. We've shown, categorized them by the level of government we're targeting, as well as the, category that we're placing them in. I'm not going to walk through each individual priority, although I am absolutely prepared to explain and discuss. So I would just really encourage commissioners to interrupt at any time and ask. And if I miss something that you'd like to know more about or have a question about, please jump in. Next slide, please. So our first category is more affordable homes. Next slide, please. So this is our proposal for the federal items that we would target to support growing the affordability of housing in Montgomery County. And I think one thing I want to highlight here is that while obviously the legislative situation for getting new legislation or new funding is quite difficult at the moment, we have identified some items that we think the Biden administration could do on its own without requiring an act of Congress, and would certainly focus on those. And then, you know, we did want to have a number of legislative asks so that if there is an opportunity to move forward on any of those, and as well as, you know, guide our engagement with our national trade associations and aligned groups, that we can ensure we can make the most of those opportunities. And I would particularly highlight the FFB program, which is HOC is, I believe, the heaviest or certainly one of the heaviest users of that program in the country. And that program is unfortunately set to sunset in 2027, stop taking applications in 2024. So we do think we have an opportunity for to actually really make an impact on getting the Biden administration to extend that program. Next slide, please.
Could that program be extended without legislation?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
It was created without legislation. It was created in the Obama administration, sunset, unfortunately, by the Trump administration, and then the Biden administration revived it. But unfortunately, they put a sunset on it at that time. So we certainly believe they could extend it. And all along, the hope has been to pursue a legislative solution in the meantime, which, you know, I think we would support as well. But this administrative program has actually worked very, very well. And so we would like to ensure that we're able to keep accessing those, you know, it's basically lower cost financing for affordable housing.
Before you proceed, let me introduce Linda Kroom, Commissioner, who has just appeared with us. Welcome.
Sorry to make gas traffic,
I know that.
but I'm here.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Not at all. So this slide shows what we are asking of our state and county partners to help us to be able to provide more affordable housing. And you can see one item I would highlight under county, which we discussed with the Administrative and Regulatory Committee, is to look for opportunities for zoning and regulatory improvements that would allow us to build more housing or move through the process faster. So that would be something we continue to look for.
Is there something in particular that you're looking at just for educational perspective?
Yeah.
Some of us run into council members and whatever it would be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or you have a cheat sheet maybe of.
Yes, and I you know, one sort of broad point I think is I want to make is that, you know, this list and this process is definitely not intended to replace you know, staff's normal engagement with the commission on any individual pieces of legislation. So we would still want to have that conversation about obviously the details of any particular bill or proposal. I understand that there are a couple of potential zoning changes that may be coming through the council, which we'll, I think, want to engage in the details of, that are, you know, not huge, but probably not small. One in particular focusing on opportunities for religious institutions to be able to have some zoning relief, because I think one of the issues they face is, we have a lot of churches, other houses of worship that are built in residential areas, single family areas, because they were able to get special exceptions for the religious use that may have a lot of extra land, parking lots, other source of property. And so there may be an opportunity to partner with some of them to do affordable housing. And that's something I know the county executive and DHCA has also been engaged in and has a program around supporting. So certainly, with our work in Emory Grove and potentially other places, that's certainly something we could take advantage of. We also have a ZTA that passed recently. Zoning text amendment. So a piece of legislation that changes the zoning code. And thank you. I do definitely get lost in acronym land. Exactly. That created so this was led by council members Friedson and Sales. And it created a new streamlined regulatory approval process specifically for affordable housing. And now the planning department is working to implement that, and they haven't rolled that out yet. So that'll be another piece that we'll definitely want to be engaged in and evaluating and sort of overlaying on working with obviously the real estate development team to overlay onto our pipeline and see what opportunities that might present. But the promise of it is to take what is potentially a 2-year or longer development review process and make a lot of the steps concurrent and then get it down potentially to as little as 90 days. So that's, the ideal form. We'll have to see how it works out. Yes.
By the way, if you had a cheat sheet on each item, if you had specific things, maybe if you have it in the can, don't write anything, but it would just be helpful, at least for me, maybe others, just to understand more, because we bump into folks once in a while that might be relevant.
Absolutely.
But thank you, Ken.
I'd like to point out that under the county find opportunities for zoning and regulatory improvements, 2 of our neighboring counties, Arlington and Alexandria, have eliminated single-family zoning so that the opportunity exists to build multifamily zoning in any part of the county, which certainly helps with the development of affordable housing. It brings down the cost of land significantly and also clears that regulatory hurdle. So that's something that Montgomery County could consider. I don't know that they are at this point, but it wouldn't be new or even innovative at this point when 2 of our neighbors have done it. Thank you.
On that point, one of the things that I've always felt that when the discussion started in Arlington about the whole missing middle conversation, that we were way ahead of that conversation in actions, not just in talk. And so we didn't get any limelight in terms of the conversation. Sometimes you don't want to be in that, okay? But nevertheless, just acknowledge we were talking about missing middle before it became public arena discussion. So again, we support that.
And this is Rick. Didn't Thrive address some of that?
Yes. So Thrive 2050, which was the general plan update, which the council passed 2 years ago now, did have a number of recommendations. It did not explicitly recommend eliminating single family zoning, but it did recommend a number of individual items and then studies, and then planning. The planning department does have on their work plan a study that they've been engaged in to look at options for allowing more density, missing middle type housing in the county. So I think we'll see what they bring forward. And then there have obviously been other legislative proposals. Councilmember Jawando had a zoning change that he had proposed that did not pass, that would have allowed eliminated single family zoning around transit stations. So certainly an ongoing conversation that's going to continue to evolve. And of course, you know, the main thing that we're asking for, I think throughout this list is more money. And that is at the end of the day, the thing that, you know, would help us to provide more housing. So next slide, please. So our next category is more rental assistance. Next slide, please. Here we're highlighting really across all three levels of government. You know, what we're really looking for is any opportunity to grow the rental assistance that we're able to provide for residents of Montgomery County. At the federal level, seeking to fund the housing assistance payments, the Housing Choice Voucher Program and related vouchers at the highest level that Congress can manage. And obviously, we are suggesting that we would like it to be an entitlement program, that really it ought to be the way that Social Security or Medicare or other kind of essential programs are. But, you know, in the absence of the political will to do that, to at least, you know, fund it at a robust level that at minimum does no harm and at best allows us to get additional incremental vouchers and serve more people. At the state, we did have in the last, I can pause if anybody.
I have a question on that one. I understand the desire, but if you make housing an entitlement, I mean, there are considerable discussions at the federal level about the inability to fund Social Security, for example, which is an entitlement. So that in itself is a major issue. If there were ever an opportunity to make housing choice vouchers an entitlement, what does that do for the development of new housing and funding of new housing? Because what you're saying then is that folks can, in fact, demand a voucher as opposed to even a hard unit. And I'm just not comfortable with us pushing to make it an entitlement. Increasing the funding and the level of attention given to housing choice vouchers is absolutely essential at all levels. But to say it's an entitlement is, I don't think we should be going in that direction.
If I could respond to that comment, I think what it would do from an economic standpoint is it would put money in the hands of a population that have not had it in order to acquire housing of whatever choice they would want. And that money would then encourage the private sector to build what kind of housing those folks are looking for, because the money would be there to either buy it or rent it. And I think that's the big difference that it would make. The question I think would have to be addressed, and it's an important question, is at what level would it be an entitlement? Right now, vouchers can extend into working persons, and you may need to have entitlement for people at 0 to 30% of average median income, but not an entitlement after that, or something like that. I think that's what the real debate would be around, is where to place the level of entitlement relative to poverty status. But in terms of economics, if you put money in the market is going to respond, and they're going to provide what's needed to get that money, so that there would be more housing built.
We can probably explore this in greater detail, because there are so many other intersections of issues that come into this conversation. Okay, because the realtors, property owners, and others, many of them, you read the papers right now, even in the DC situation, for example, with vouchers, are simply saying that they are not getting enough money to operate the properties under the current structure of what the rent schedule is set for. So you get into a whole discussion that cost of doing it really could become 4 times what we would think just conservatively would cost you to do this, because where do you price it, and how do you keep people still remaining in units and keep up with the growing economic cost of operation of senior housing that's rental. So it's just an interesting intersection. There's a lot of conversation about that. And so we certainly want to be in the middle of that conversation, but
Can I say something? I'm looking at it here when it says making house choice vouchers and entitlement, but we have other programs too. And if you want that particular program, just that particular program to be an entitlement, what about the rest of the programs? I have to go along with Rick on that one.
I would like to chime in here. This is actually included because it's a national movement in terms of other industry associations advocating for this, as well as the various administrations, including this type of ask in their housing plans or platforms. I think that when we're raising these issues, some of them may be ambitious and quite frankly, aspirational, but it is joining in with peers to just raise the conversation, raise the level. I think many times what is asked for is the stars and hoping that you fall, or is it the other way around? Go to stars, moon, either way. You're reaching as high as you can and understanding that now you've created an opportunity for some good discussion that needs to happen around a subsidy program that quite frankly is imperative in terms of addressing the affordability crises in this country. And so when we're asked by our different industry associations to join them in lobby day on the Hill, they're bringing these larger discussions to the table. We'd like to be in a position to say, sure, we can engage in this conversation. Not HOC is not going to engage in that particular discussion. It really is just a door opener for a broader discussion on the need for subsidies.
Chelsea, other than the Low Income Housing Coalition, which has been taking this position for 30 years, who else is specifically asking to make it an entitlement?
We should look back at first of all, they're getting ready to publish some of their legislative priorities coming out of this last season. I know that the Biden-Harris administration included this as an initiative in their housing plan a while back. We should look to see what the other associations are doing, but knowing that the National Low Income Housing Coalition also raises this. It's one of the partners that we work with, just trying to raise it to the commission. If it is something that's raised, do we want to take such a strong stance to not be a part of the conversation? Not that we would lead the charge. And so.
yes, also supported by a number of state housing finance as well as development agencies that have also taken this position.
I think it helps to highlight how big the gap is as we're advocating to the state or even the county to say, yes, we would like the federal government to really play its role here. But as it stands, only about 25% of people who are eligible for a housing choice voucher nationwide are able to get one. And so there is this huge gap that we need to fill. Of course, we can make that point without advocating explicitly, but
yeah, I would just add, Rick, this is not an outlier position. So it's broadly held by a number of housing groups or advocates. And as noted, it's aspirational. I don't think we want to take a position of like, well, we're okay if only 50% of people who, or some lower level who are eligible get served. We want to serve everyone.
But Ken, on the county part, again, if there's an opportunity to increase rental assistance, we can, if you had a blurb, we can be helpful in theory when the time is right.
yeah, and I do.
And I don't know the program, so.
No, I do take that suggestion generally. I think that's a great idea. So once the commission has sort of established what the priorities are, absolutely, I think creating a fact sheet for each one that explains what our current programs are and what some possibilities are. And you know, I think that's makes all the sense in the world. Okay, so next slide, please. So our next category is more supportive services. Next slide, please. So here, really kind of the same across all three categories, where what we're really asking for is one, to continue to robustly fund and maybe even expand the direct services programs that HOC is currently performing and we currently have funding for, to then work to increase our level of partnership and collaboration with agencies across government, to be able to make more services available, to deepen the services, as well as look for any opportunity to reduce the administrative burdens on our applicants and on our customers, to be able to access services by you know, being able to coordinate more closely with agencies that are offering overlapping services. And then finally, making kind of an open call to all elected officials to engage with us, you know, maybe look at properties that are in their district and help us find any opportunity to apply for grants, potentially look for earmarks, other funding opportunities, state bond bills, that would allow us to benefit those properties on a more individual basis. There's any questions about this? Okay, next slide, please. And then our last category is regulatory flexibility. Next slide, please. So here we have, I'll address the federal, what we're suggesting, and I think this is aligned again with some of our national partners, is asking Congress to expand the Moving to Work program to allow all public housing authorities to apply for waivers and gain access to those flexibilities. This would, you know, any waiver that HOC would apply for, first of all, would have to follow, you know, passage of federal legislation, and then that would go through the commission, and we would have an in-depth discussion about any particular regulation. But what the Moving to Work program does is allow public housing authorities that are allowed into the program to waive pretty much any of the federal regulations that guide the voucher and public housing programs. So you have to apply for the waiver. HUD has to grant it. The slots available for the program are such that HOC does not qualify and will not qualify within what's allowed by Congress so far. It's a sort of a limited pilot, but we think it has produced a lot of successful outcomes for Moving to Work agencies, and you know, we think every PHA should have the opportunity to explore that. Particularly, I think some of the flexibilities we would look at could be around, you know, related to us being a particularly high cost area. So looking at flexibilities around payment standards, around, you know, any number of things there. But of course, that would be, you know, a separate and very in-depth process. At the state level, we have actually gotten engagement from a state delegate, which we'll be able to share, you know, more specific information about shortly, I believe, who has proposed eliminating a couple of the burdens that are in our state authorizing legislation. So one is we are required to annually post our financial statements on our website, but we're also required to advertise that we've posted our financial statements in a newspaper that meets certain circulation requirements. The only newspaper that still exists that meets those requirements is the Washington Post. And so it's actually not an insignificant amount of money to post that advertisement. So there's a proposal to remove the requirement to advertise the posting. We would still have to post our financial statements, of course. And then there is a requirement in our state and county authorizing statutes that HOC hold a public hearing for any assisted housing that we build in the county. And, this does overlap with some federal requirements. It also obviously overlaps with the kind of community meetings that we're required to hold in the development process. But, this particular delegate felt like, it's actually totally opposite to the approach we ought to take to affordable housing, to have a specific additional requirement just because the housing is affordable. So this would not eliminate any of the requirements that we have to do, because we're doing a new development through the planning process, but just take away this sort of special additional hurdle. If the state were to pass this change, we would hope that our county council would also take that up. And, I think it just sends a strong message that, affordable housing is really no different from any other kind of housing in your neighborhood, and it shouldn't have any kind of special burdens.
So I'm curious on this one. I think at a minimum, affordable housing should not have additional burden. But I'm sort of also wondering why we're limiting ourselves to removing requirements that are uniquely burdensome to affordable housing rather than, streamlining the process for affordable housing development or making it actually easier in some cases than other types of development.
That's a great point, Commissioner. And, it does overlap with the item I highlighted in the affordable homes of looking at zoning regulatory. That definitely overlaps with the comment that Commissioner Kelleher made. So I certainly think we could remove the word uniquely if the commission would like.
Absolutely. And I think it was crafted this way in response to ensuring that the commission was okay with us supporting that legislation that's on the way, that was crafted just for that particular purpose. But writing it broader is definitely, I think, a good strategy here.
Just as a personal note, I recall almost 50 years ago, there was an initiative in DC where I was working at the time called Project Home. The idea was to reduce the entitlement and regulatory requirements that made it so difficult to get a project from beginning to end through the regulatory entitlement process. 50 years ago, we're still talking about it. And if anything, it's gotten more burdensome. It takes you longer because now we have more concern, environment, energy, transportation, everything else that wasn't on the schedule before, and now just add into the whole licensing, permitting, entitlement, zoning, and everything. So anything we could do, because we all know right now with all of the things that are spiraling out of control that relate to building a unit anywhere, that if we could find a way to make it easier to get to a point where you could put a shovel in the ground, it would be certainly a great outcome.
Absolutely, Commissioner. And I would highlight actually that ties really nicely into the last item on the state and county slides there, where when state or county are considering imposing new requirements, whether that's energy efficiency, fire safety, building code. I think there's a large number, air conditioning, that we've seen. Not that we would oppose it, but that we would ask that they really consider the cost impact on affordable housing in particular, and look for ways to offset that impact, so that we can get both the good outcomes. Okay, next slide, please.
Actually, before you move on, it's just looking at the federal for a moment. It's been a while since I worked in the Congress, so I'm not sure what the current status is, but I recall, on moving to work, there are clearly a lot of benefits to the moving to work program and housing authorities, public housing authorities, that, there are many that are doing good work with that. I know when I was working in the Congress, also there was a lot of concern from advocates about the flexibilities of MTW and the opportunities for abuse in that. So I'm curious, like, if that concern has faded, or if that's still an issue that divides sometimes the housing authorities from some of the housing, or especially tenant advocates.
I would say that the areas of concern really focus in on housing authorities that have traditional public housing and that may not be required to follow REAC and other checks and balances that the Congress, of course, would want to keep in place when they become an MTW authority. There's also some fungibility with funding, which is quite frankly needed in this day and age that comes along with MTW. But there are reporting mechanisms, and on the heels of COVID, where many of the MTW flexibilities were permitted in terms of other housing authorities being able to take advantage of those same flexibilities, it really resulted in a positive outcome. And so HUD has on occasion piecemealed various waivers that they're allowing other housing authorities to take advantage of. And there definitely is a lot of advocacy around any initiative where HUD acknowledges that this has been beneficial, allow other housing authorities to take advantage of even that particular waiver. Some instances, for example, include seniors and disabled participants not having to recertify every year, how burdensome that is, and therefore making that maybe 2 years or 3 years to help those individuals. There are other programs related to how long someone is unassisted before they are no longer in the voucher program that has allowed for families to really move out of the program because they have a longer runway to develop and save some funding before they transition out. And so some of those particular initiatives have been a part of the advocacy related to advancing MTW for all, or at least waivers for all. You have to have a certain rating with HUD in order to even be eligible to become an MTW authority. This agency had that option, I think, a couple of years ago and chose not to proceed at that time. But every cohort that HUD introduces has different parameters. So the last parameter was just focused on small housing authorities. And so we're really first advocating with HUD to get HUD to understand the benefit of this being available, especially the waivers, to many other housing authorities, and then ultimately for them to seek support from Congress. There are congressional members who still feel that MTW is not the way to go, but it is because of their concerns in terms of the potential of mismanagement, the fungibility there too. How will we make sure that the actual properties are being evaluated or checked in terms of REAC if it's not required under the MTW program? So I do think that there's discussion, but so far for every cohort that has gone forward to Congress, there's been support to advance it. So it's about also getting HUD to understand the potential benefits there.
Yeah, and I'm certainly comfortable with our position here. I guess I would just want to make sure that in any advocacy we're doing, that we're not also supporting removing certain protections for tenants, and not just supporting, making sure we're not supporting, but that we are supporting maintaining protections against agencies that may abuse MTW.
Absolutely. And there's a coalition, an MTW coalition of all the MTW agencies across the US. They meet twice a year, but they have a very comprehensive policy paper as well as position statement that allows for those considerations as well. And we can definitely make sure that the board is provided with summary information on that. And we're keeping our eyes open to see where this goes next. But at a bare minimum, we're suggesting that where there's proven best practices, we want to be a part of the conversation that says, yes, seniors and disabled individuals should have the option to not have to recertify every year when they've demonstrated they're on set income, et cetera. So.
It is the fact that HUD as well as the Office of Management and Budget have published studies of the moving to work demonstration and of the kinds of waivers that many of them have pursued. And certainly, you go through those things, it's clear that one size doesn't necessarily fit everybody, because there are uniquenesses among the administration of programs locally in terms of local policies and other things that sometimes can prevent the implementation of some of those waivers that are being granted. So it's really kind of, you got, what it does is you can look through that sort of directory of things that have been done and what is it that would make sense for your authority, and if agencies begin to, coalesce together around specific things, it makes it easier to leverage that to get some changes and to get the pass through of some of those changes that you were saying to other authorities. So yeah, but there are studies out there that have been done to show you what they've done, and it's interesting stuff.
Absolutely. So next slide, please. And this is our last slide for the day. So, core question. This is not necessarily a formal resolution, but just hoping to get a clear indication from the commission of support for these priorities. As I said, we would then, have our sort of normal process to discuss individual pieces of legislation. Of course, there are going to be things that come up that aren't on this list, whether they're opportunities that, we want to pursue as an organization, or obviously things that elected officials put in and we have to respond to. So I don't know whether it's really up to you whether you want to sort of formally vote, or I can just kind of take the, I think, fairly clear feedback you've given today.
Roy, before you get to taking an action, one thing that back on the first category, did you consider having something in there that suggests developing incentives for getting the private sector to get more involved in affordable housing?
I don't have there's not an item on the list that explicitly addresses that. Obviously the zoning and regulatory issues could affect private sector, and then general advocacy for more affordable housing subsidies would affect, largely nonprofit providers, but also for-profit affordable housing providers.
The thing I was thinking about is at both state and or local level, there is the potential that they could consider tax breaks for some developers who in fact produce some affordable housing. So I think it would be useful to just put something in relating to exploring or developing incentives for private sector involvement in producing affordable housing.
Commissioner Nelson, I think that's an interesting concept. I do have a question about it, however. It does appear, especially here in this county, that there are some differences of opinions as it pertains to private developers, and our council members and county executive at different points have different opinions on how to incentivize them in terms of building in our county. In terms of aligning with a particular group or a particular initiative, do you have any thoughts about that? Because I do know that that's an area where we're clear we want more affordable. When it gets into additional discussions about private developers, there seems to be a lot of different opinion politically about that particular issue.
I thought I said develop incentives. I said, for example, they could be taxes, but I was not trying to specify a specific incentive, because I agree with you that there are varying opinions on the different incentives. But I do think that the subject of incentives for private sector participation in affordable housing is important. And as you've stated, the purpose of this priority list is for us to be able to at least say the commission is supportive of doing things in this area, and gives you and the staff the license to go and have further conversations. I just think it was something we haven't touched on.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
I guess I'd like to suggest that, a couple things. One, while that item, Rick, may not be explicitly listed in there, I think it is implicit in a number of the items. I mean, one thing about this list is that many of these items are issues that would not necessarily benefit HOC specifically or directly, but that would promote affordable housing generally. But items like LIHTC, the low-income housing tax credit, certainly brings in the private sector. If we talk about reducing regulatory barriers for affordable housing, that could be a benefit and an incentive to private sector involvement as well. So I think there are items in there that, again, are not just to the benefit of HOC and, can provide some form of incentive to the private sector as well.
I think Rick is right, though. There's something wrong in our county. That we are a high cost area, but there are more high cost areas that are higher cost, New York or Los Angeles, that have a robust nonprofit, for-profit development activities going on. HOC seems to be the only game in town, which is good, but we can't do everything, right? And so there's something off. I know in California, you develop affordable housing, there's zero property taxes. New York has various other property tax incentives, not to zero, but there's something wrong in our county that, and when you say private sector, it can be for profit and nonprofit, not just governmental. And I think it really is a worthy discussion. What is wrong with our county that there is something wrong, right? You came from DC, they're for-profit, nonprofit developers there, I think. There is something wrong.
And we did adopt, the council, directly to your point, the council adopted 3 years ago, a sort of guaranteed tax abatement, property tax abatement for affordable housing development, but they limited it to nonprofits only. And there was an explicit debate about that. Certainly there were those who felt like, well, they're building the affordable housing, then why do we care what their structure is? And obviously others who felt like, well,
But at least they recognized something in the private sector needed to be done. But anyway, there are lots of things other jurisdictions. I think Rick, it's a fair point.
I think we need a big toolbox when we start dealing with this whole area. And certainly I support the idea of incentives, but what I don't want it to do is be an offset to not putting real money on the table. I mean, people start thinking about incentives when they don't want to put up cash. But what can we find off balance sheet that we can give that may incentivize somebody to do something? Okay, because when you give away receipt of tax revenues to the county or whoever, it cuts off on revenues, right? Somebody benefits, but somebody loses. A lot of times incentives have that impact. So, I support the whole idea because it's part of the whole bucket of stuff we got to do, but it doesn't substitute for real money.
I'm not trying to tell you, I don't want to get lost in this, but many states have their own state low income housing tax credit, and it's real dollars, right? Just like the federal. And anyway, it's just there are other incentives out there, but there's something wrong with our county.
So just for the sake of clarity, or I can wait.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so if I understood what Commissioner Nelson proposed, we would add under state and county, explore incentives to increase private sector participation in affordable housing. And I guess I'd just like to ask if the whole commission agrees.
With that included, I would like to move that the commission adopt the incentives or the recommendations that you have presented for legislative priorities for this legislative year.
Second.
Been probably moved and seconded, and that we adopt the legislative agenda you've been put forth. Then I get all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Also, think it's appropriate that you should make that motion, Commissioner Kelleher, because in fact that your committee, in fact, had seen these before and supported the this legislative plan to come before us. Also, I want to just compliment both our committee work as well as the staff for the material to put together. I thought, I really enjoyed reading this. It was put in a format that was easy to process it and to get through it and understand it. And I just want to compliment you all for the work you did together to make sure that we got this kind of presentation. And as we move forward, it's certainly the way we want to be able to proceed. So I want to thank you all very much for that, and thank the commissioners for the work that you all did working with staff to get this point. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.